Welcome back to Restless. Paul's bracing himself.
I know,
I might say something
yeah.
corny and cheesy, but I don't have anything on top of my head for this one. But
You don't have anything on top of your head?
That's because you shaved it.
Well, that's true.
because I'm bald, I don't have anything on the top of my head. Yes.
I was going to go for it until Paul started it, but then I figured I might as well jump in. Yeah.
One way
You actually have
or
a lot of things off the top of your head, but
Yes, hair. I don't have that anymore. Yeah.
it's all off the top of your head.
So that's why we're recording this episode. So very shortly from now, you're going to be seeing us on YouTube.
You'll see what we mean.
We're going to be recording via YouTube, but
We're discussing wardrobe. Now, I have two. I'm very bimodal in terms of what I wear. So right now I'm wearing a hoodie and
You're
like,
bimodal. I
khakis.
walk on 2 feet too.
That's bipedal.
No, just kidding.
Okay. And then sometimes I'm wearing like
My car is
my
four
biz,
wheels,
with
so
my
it's quad modal.
with my biz. Sometimes I'm wearing biz cash with my
Quasimodo.
with my finance bro vest. Those are like my two modalities that
Business
I dress
cash.
in. And we're trying to figure out what's best.
Well, if
So-
we're going for the young adult group, we got to dress like young adults.
Vineyard Vines.
I think
Vineyard Vines. Joe's got Vineyard
when I taught
Vines.
Vineyard
CCD, my
Vines,
entire
Martha's
classroom management
Vineyard.
strategy was I'm young and I wear Vineyard Vines. What more do you guys want from me? It didn't work. But that was my entire going. I was like, I wear Vineyard Vines t-shirts. I'm in my mid-20s. Actually, I was in my early 20s at that point.
No,
they're
but
gonna love me.
I mean,
They're gonna
do
listen to everything I say.
But do you know the lingo? Because that's really cool drip, which will get you Riz.
Anyway,
Oh wow, you got the Gen Z.
Man, you
lingo
got to get the
down.
Gen Z. If you ever get a chance, everyone who's listening to this has to go on YouTube, and they've translated parts of the Bible into Gen Z
Oh, no.
language.
Oh,
That's
no.
hysterical.
It
Was
is
it done by
so
ChatGPT?
stinking hilarious.
Probably.
Oh my gosh, absolutely hilarious.
Okay, today's topic is
Anyway, today's topic.
you might think it was topic of evil, but we already did that. It was
No.
it's banter.
No, yes.
What is that?
My clothing is evil, but no. The topic is authority.
Clothing is evil.
Because so two things. First of all, I wrote my senior thesis in college on the topic of authority.
really. I didn't know that.
I did, yeah.
You sent it to me several years ago. It's still sitting on my desktop. I'll read it one day.
It's
I'll
really
remember.
good. You should read it.
I feel like you remember that I don't.
fairly readable. Yeah, fairly readable. So I've always been very interested in.
Wait, I gotta go back. What do you mean fairly readable? Did you write it in
It's
like
mostly in
Tamil?
English.
Did you write it in Tamil or like
What is Tamil?
or like Swahili or some other?
It's actually in Esperanto, so you have to.
Oh, it's Esperanto.
to
That's
translate
a
it,
deep
but
cut.
that's right.
That's mostly Spanish.
yeah.
Yeah. No.
I think my
So
first match
authority.
should be in
No, I
Esperanto.
wrote it in a question and answer format.
Oh, so it's Socratic.
So it's Socratic.
Thomas
Yeah,
Aquinas,
it was
yeah.
Aquinas. I was trying to
more
do
like Aquinas, okay.
type
Said
deal,
contra.
So you
said
steel
contra,
man,
yeah.
you steel man the argument and you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyway, so I've always been very fascinated about the idea of authority. Where's it come from?
You don't like authority.
I can't say that publicly on a radio show.
Sure.
He has a boss.
I have a boss.
You're very obedient, actually. You're obedient in a very good way, I think.
Tried to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
tried to
every
be.
person is different flavor of obedience.
Yeah, and we could talk about that
Yeah.
because I think obedience is something that we have to, owe to somebody. But also we've been thinking about recently. There's this big issue going down in Texas, right? How there's the federal government saying one thing and the Texas authorities are saying another regarding the illegal immigration that's crossing the border down there, and it's really kind of a question of authority. Who has authority down there? Is it the state of Texas? Is it the country of the United States? Is it the feds? Is it the who knows? And so we're trying to grapple with that. And I don't know, our all the documents in America talk about authority coming from the people. Catholic theology from Aquinas says that authority comes from God. So,
Vox populi, vox dei, though, right? Am I right?
voice of the people, the voice is the voice of God.
Yeah. Vox dei, yeah. Right? Am I right?
No, you're not right. Cool. You are wrong on that count. I mean,
I
what do
don't
you
know. I
think?
think I think we have to. Well, I think we could talk about two types of authority. I mean, I think. Well, at least now we fast forward. No, I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to rewind.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
so
my
if we go
rewind
back
sound.
to the era of Catholic monarchies,
Yes.
or general monarchy.
King Louis XIV.
Yeah, Spanish monarchy. I mean, at one time, the English monarchy.
French, yeah.
Yeah, they were all Catholic monarchies where the monarch, the sovereign, speaks in a sense on behalf of God.
Well, they called it the divine right of kings.
Yeah.
Right? That kings were put there by God's will specifically.
Wasn't
Yeah.
there at one point, maybe there still is, like an actual Catholic rite of coronation?
Well, if you saw the coronation of King Charles,
Wasn't there,
it was just Anglican, but
Yeah, I mean, King
it was
Philip
a
VI
spiritual ritual,
in
yeah.
in Spain. I'm sure he had
Pretty
something.
sweet.
Yeah,
I mean, there's other Catholic monarchies like Liechtenstein.
Like Pope Francis is a Catholic monarch.
True.
that's true.
Vatican
yeah,
City.
I don't know that he has a specific
They
coronation.
used to
right?
do a coronation.
They did
They
used
used
to,
to
the-
do. Now
the
that now
triple
that
tiara.
the tiara's in Washington D.C.
Now it's
Oh, is it really?
one of the many.
One of
but
them,
yeah.
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 Now it's a papal inauguration.
Is that really what they call it?
I think it is,
That's
actually.
I thought it was an installation.
Maybe. I've definitely heard
Inauguration
somewhere.
is generally what we refer to for the president.
Yes, thank you. I'm aware of that, but I do think I've
Are
heard.
you?
Yeah, I know.
Good.
So shockingly, they actually did teach that to me in my poli-sci classes in college. So
I see.
Yeah, so Joe's got a poli-sci background.
I do,
And Paul's just a
and I have lots of hot takes.
passionate person about
I'm
lots.
passionate. I
Yeah.
got passion.
So you're going on
Okay,
about
so we had this
monarchs,
idea
yeah.
of Catholic monarchy, and now obviously after the revolutions and so on and so forth, Catholic monarchies are pretty much a thing of the past, save a few. So what came out of that? Well, the Enlightenment came, which included the Protestant Reformation, by the way, and this idea that actually no, the sovereign governs on the right of the people, based on the consent of the governed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually a change, right? As opposed to consent of God. Now
Right.
it's the consent of the governed. Well, maybe that's fine because that came out of the Enlightenment. So maybe that's just kind of what had to happen at that point. Because you had the proliferation of printing press, you had newspapers, you had knowledge transfer, such that the people were more informed. They knew what was going on. They knew bad things that were happening,
Right.
right? And so maybe that was a natural evolution of what happened in this case. So then you fast forward to the United States, and we have this so-called Christian founding. It's Protestant in its nature, and we have, pantheists and deists and things like that as our founding fathers, as well as like true Christians, I would say.
And 2 Catholics, to my memory.
From
John Carroll, baby from Maryland.
One more
Maryland.
name I
Yeah.
remember. Yeah.
yeah, so we did have Catholics.
John Carroll and Companion.
Yeah, they were not. They weren't well. The Catholics weren't well regarded during the founding of this country. But it's the idea that it's the consent of the governed, but then the governed are acting based on the consent of God.
But that was one of the big sticking points why Catholics were not accepted, because Catholics had this monarchical idea that government comes from God, and Protestants were like, no, it comes from the people. And
That's the problem. But that was the de-evolution of Catholic monarchy is what led to that.
But you could even see that all the way up to 1960, right? When JFK was running for president, and people were like, well, are you just going to listen to your Pope and not to the people?
Would that it were.
Because I know, yeah, he was not the stellar example of what it means to be a Catholic, but
No.
but that was the question. Did he take direction from God or from the people? And he ended up saying, well, from the people. In that famous,
I think as a
Dallas
president of the
ministers.
United States, you have to. I mean, if you're consenting to that if you're going to be president of the United States. So, I mean, if you don't say that, then you're not actually, the oath that you're taking is a lie.
Yeah, but then what happens when all the people want abortion and that's wrong? I mean,
And that's the problem.
that is the problem,
So this,
right?
Yeah, so this is the famous. This is not Cardinal Burke, but Edmund Burke, right? Who was actually a member of Parliament in his day, and I think it's called the letter to the electors of Bristol, right? So I can't remember the details, but there's some issue which he knew his constituents didn't favor his own position. And what he said to them was, "You've sent me here not to do just your will, as you call it, day by day, but you sent me here to exercise my own judgment. That's what you've elected. It's my own judgment, and you are welcome to choose somebody else next time. But you've sent me. I'm not an extension of you. I am an individual person who makes decisions." And yeah, they elected somebody else next time.
That's what happened.
Yeah, so I think that since we're talking about like democratic authority, I think that an understanding of authority in which elected leaders are simply meant to do whatever they know their people want is wrong. And you see this. I think this distinction between statesman and politician is sort of just. I mean, it's sort of an anomalistic thing. It's like it doesn't really exist. But if we want to say it exists, to me, the difference is that a statesman is a politician, right? So like someone like Winston Churchill, was happy to do what the people wanted. But I think there's a point in which a good person acting in politics, there are lines which he or she will not cross. There are stands he or she will take, even if they're unpopular, even if it costs them their seat. And if you look at the degeneration really of our politics, I think a lot of it comes from people sort of slavish loyalty to the will of their electors as they see it, because they are so attached to their power and their seats.
Well, they want to be reelected. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they'll do anything to stay in office. And so they don't exercise their own judgment, and they will tell you that what they're doing is wrong behind the scenes, maybe even in front of the scenes.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's the whole
yeah.
Catholic politician who's like, oh, personally, I'm pro-life, but publicly, I'm pro-choice because I got to do with the will of people.
Are they Catholic? Anyway,
That's a whole nother
yeah, I
topic.
mean, think about it. We didn't have to make abortion wasn't a law against it until sometime in the 19th century.
Yeah, you didn't have to make the
You
law.
didn't have to make the
because
law. It was
the
just
faith told
abhorrent,
you.
and it Like
I do think that there were earlier laws against abortion in various states.
there were, but the widespread adoption of abortion laws was in
You're saying of pro-abortion
anti-abortion.
I do think that there
laws.
were anti-abortion laws.
There were prior. They
earlier
were
to
over a
Republic.
period of since the founding,
Yeah.
but really,
Yeah, I mean, it goes all-
they took root in the 19th
Sure.
century. So, which is like relatively recent,
That is relatively recent,
right?
yeah.
And it was overturned relatively recently.
Right.
But I mean, the founding fathers wrote about this too. They said if it's not a Christian, I forget who it was, but I think it was Ben Franklin. He's like, if it's not a Christian,
Adams.
Adams. Like, if it's not a Christian nation, then
America was something like our government was built for moral and religious people, and is wholly inadequate to the governance of any other. Is actually the quote.
And so it's like, yeah, if your people are generally trying to live a virtuous Christian life, then they're going to elect people that are going to be living virtuous Christian lives and then voting and moving in that direction.
Right.
But
And Thomas Jefferson said this quote, which I always struck me. He said, "The government you elect is the government you deserve."
Oh yeah.
In a democracy. So the kind of people we are is the kind of leaders we have, and that strikes me because so many people are like, "Oh, I can't believe it's Trump versus Biden," and
Yeah.
can we not do better in a country of 330 million people?
Right.
Well, the reason we have those two is because that's who we are. They epitomize kind of who we are. When we are people who love to watch soap operas unfold in real time.
Yeah, I largely agree with that. I will also say that there are various, there's just kind of matters of political physics at play in America in terms of how the party system works, how the electoral process works. That has led us to this point. So it's not just now. If you, it's not just that we deserve these two, but we do largely deserve these two.
yeah,
You know?
I mean, it is
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
that the favorability ratings for both men are very low,
Very low.
very low. Which and it's
But can't we
it's
get a
shock-
third option? I mean, apparently not.
We tried.
Why not
we
just-
tried, but it
well,
didn't work.
We don't need a third option. We just need two better primary options.
Sure.
Yes,
Sure.
I mean, the two parties.
And I'm sorry, there actually were better options.
Right. I mean, you look at
at least on the one side.
you look at the Republican primary.
Yeah.
Right. Pretty much anybody other than Trump would have been a better option.
Yeah, I
in
can
my
think of at
opinion,
least
you know?
one option. At least
Yeah.
one of them would have been a worse option, or at least
Yeah, I
just
mean,
as
maybe a
bad.
couple would have been pretty
Yeah.
lousy, but I mean, we still chose.
Oh,
And
did we?
Not we. I mean,
I didn't.
Connecticut didn't.
Actually, I think
to
was
vote
the
for-
primary this? I don't even know. I think it's next. week.
It's on.
With now we're giving
cares?
away when we're actually recording this
It's in
episode.
April, yeah.
Yeah, this is actually
April
going to come
25th.
out in like January of 25 after the election.
Yeah,
No, we got.
during Trump's third term, probably.
Right. Ooh, hot take.
Ooh,
I don't know.
that was just, I'm just kidding. It's
It'd
not
be
enough
very
to
old.
happen.
It'd be very old if that were to happen. Reagan didn't get a third term.
Yes, because it was unconstitutional.
It's
That's true, but
Yeah,
there was talk in the Republican Party about how we can possibly change that
I
constitution.
do think so.
You just elect Nancy Reagan.
there you go.
And there you go. You know,
Well, they put in
which-
Bush.
which-
I mean,
that's
honestly,
right,
they put
that's-
in Bush.
I mean,
which Mrs.
honestly,
Trump
like-
would we elect to replace Donald Trump?
which Mrs. Trump?
Yeah, which of the three options?
No, I'm thinking-
only the official ones.
I'm
Like kind of
thinking
the extra
Michelle
ones.
Obama might be the
Yeah.
is like
She might actually
that'd be
be
Obama part two. But anyway,
So here's the question:
Hillary lost. So
To what extent does the moral character of an authority figure matter, both in the religious and secular sense? There's the respect for office and respect for the man. We've had good and bad popes kind of morally. We've had good and bad presidents morally. Sometimes you hear this is a big argument, like in the '90s against Bill Clinton, that he was morally unfit. Fact check's true. But now when you say that kind of thing about either Joe Biden or Donald Trump, people act as if it's like this quaint sort of like, oh, isn't that adorable? Like you believe in morals for public office. You know what I mean? But to what extent is character destiny?
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately we've devolved.
I don't mean politically. I mean like if for your own
I
opinion,
think
what
in an
matters.
ideal world you would want both, but I think we've devolved to the point where you kind of you take what you can get, which is not ideal,
what a shame.
right? And it's like I don't look like, yeah, I mean I'm probably going to vote for Donald Trump, but it's like I don't look to Donald Trump as like a moral
Moral
leader.
leader? No.
But
That's good.
like,
A lot of people do.
and I actually look at Joe Biden as an apostate.
I have a question
So
for
what's
you.
worse? You tell me.
Have you ordered yet your Donald Trump endorsed Bible?
I have not ordered my Bible yet.
Okay.
Apparently, the
That's
proceeds
surprising.
are not going to Donald Trump's campaign in any way.
I don't know. I'm staying out of that.
I
conversation.
also didn't buy my $1,000 sneakers.
The Bible one is what kills me.
It's an interesting thing, but actually, so to go on that, to riff on that for just a second.
Sure.
So in the Capitol building, in the rotunda of the Capitol, is a mural, just like in a Baroque church. It's a mural, and It's called, well, I won't say what it's called yet, but it's Washington sitting on a throne as a Christ-like figure with his right hand raised, surrounded by like pagan angels and gods. That's in the Rotunda of Capitol. And the name of that is called the Apotheosis of Washington. So it's the becoming of God of Washington. So for a lot of, I would say this is probably fading, but for a lot of people, like Americanism is almost like a religion. And it actually was defined as a heresy in the 19th century by the Catholic Church. But
It's probably the greatest heresy.
Yeah, but that was super controversial because the Pope condemned Americanism, and then the American bishops came back and said, "You totally misunderstand. We don't believe in this."
Right, but he was reading something that was probably, there's some truth to it though, where there are people that look at the founding fathers almost as like demigods. It's almost like a religion, that they are like the prophets of America, and therefore it makes sense that you'd have the Apotheosis of Washington. You'd have like you put the founding documents in the Bible. Like from a sect of like Protestant, like American nationalism, you could actually see the logical conclusion on where you'd end up in that position.
But do you believe that America has a unique role in history?
We do. We do.
There's no question.
There's no question that we do. Now,
But do you believe it's divinely ordered?
All things are within God's plan.
Whether
it's active or passive, I don't know.
I am a rather patriotic person, and I do believe in the good of America, in as much as that it is good.
I firmly believe that America is, of the options for a global hegemon, America is the best one at the moment.
Yeah, I think as Catholics, we're supposed to have kind of a soft spot for like smaller Catholic monarchy. Like that's kind of like the ideal. I mean, it is, because we are a monarchy, right? So I think we have a.
Well, so I don't. Yeah. So I think that we Catholics can be okay with monarchy. I don't. I get a little kind of like nauseous when people start talking about it as if it's like the ultimate end of politics has to be monarchy. I really don't.
No, I don't necessarily think that's the case. Especially as a pragmatist, I don't think that's actually true these days. But I do think we have to have a little bit of a soft spot for that. And I think like Jordan Peterson has put this in a really good way. It's like, well, why do people respect the Queen of England? Well, now the deceased Queen of England, and so like why do people respect her so much? It's like, well, because he would always say, like Jordan would always say something like, because the prime minister has to go and essentially have like a confession, or go reconcile his sins to the queen or the monarch every week, something like that.
Yeah, that's
right.
Exactly
And then there's this long history and this long kind of perspective that's provided. And I think we get that a little bit when we think about our papacy, and like there's something to be said about that.
So actually, I think that this raises an interesting thing, which is this. Part of, I think, the cultural power of the British monarchy comes from the fact that because the monarch is the head of state but not the head of government, the monarchy has very successfully in England separated itself out from partisan politics, such that all people nobody feels alienated by the monarchy because of a policy position.
Well, she is what we used to call in theology the corporate embodiment.
Sure.
Right.
But that's why it's a ceremonial thing. That's why it's a head of state, not a head of government. And I think that you can kind of say, and this is not a criticism of any specific pope, I just the evolution, it's the papacy. It's also like the office of the president of the USCCB. Like there's this role of like, I have to be omnipresent. You have to see me all the time. I have to be involved in everything in terms of like nitty gritty governance. And there is an interesting counter model in the British monarchy, which is like, my power comes from the fact that I'm a cultural voice and I don't need to govern every second of your life.
Well, that was what the president of the United States was supposed to be.
And that
the Pope
was supposed to be.
100 years
the Pope was
Yeah.
for 1980 years, really, with Pope.
So
with that change with TV and JP2.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think JP2 even didn't micromanage a whole lot.
No, actually,
in some ways you wish you would have more, right? I mean, frankly. But yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about that. But the presidency of the United States was modeled after the British monarchy, but it was elected. It wasn't inherited.
The reason I'm raising this is that I think it's important when we talk about authority that we don't just mean sort of ordinary governance authority. That there is a kind of authority which is like a soft power type thing, which is, in some ways, I mean, does the British, let's back to Elizabeth II, not the current king, because I think it's a different situation, but did Elizabeth II have more power over her country than Boris Johnson or David Cameron, who were the various prime ministers? In a real sense, no, right? Because the prime minister is the head of government. But in a sense, I mean, kind of, she definitely appealed to more people. Like, in a sense, she actually did have a lot of power.
Well, she stirred up the love, and that I was asking actually one of our teens the other day, who's a big patriotic guy, and I said, when I pledge allegiance to America, what am I pledging allegiance to? Is it the land? Is it the people? Is it the government? What am I? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I never thought about that. And I wrestle with that. Like, what am I pledging allegiance to? What is America? And,
Well, okay.
but when you have someone like that, you're like, okay, that's the corporate embodiment, right? That person. That's why I was always taught growing up, you have to love the Pope, because the Pope is the corporate embodiment of what it means to be a Catholic. Now, it's more difficult when a Pope does micromanage and a Pope kind of meddles in things that he probably shouldn't meddle in. Not that, I mean, are there things he shouldn't meddle in? Yeah, I mean, I think because, for example, when he put out Tris Traditionis Custodians, I'm sorry, I'm going to go there.
Love talking about TC. Let's go.
He said in there, like, that a parish bulletin cannot advertise a traditional Latin Mass. I'm sorry, that's not the role of what the Pope should be meddling in.
You don't think that the Pope should be telling you what you should put in your bulletin?
No, I don't think so.
Next to your mommy and me.
Right. Right. I got my
No
pasta
more.
dinner.
No more mommy
but
and me.
That's right.
Unrelatedly, obviously, to
Anyway.
what you guys talking about. I'm curious about the Catholic response to authority. Now, I'll lay my cards out. I like authority is a good thing. I really do believe that. I tend to believe it more when it's not being applied to my life, though. And I do honestly bristle under authority sometimes. Specifically, I really hate arbitrary authority, and I hate when people exercise authority in an arbitrary manner. You know what I mean? And so, yeah.
Well,
So, and there are authorities which are not like, I don't believe that, like, the mayor, the first selectman of my town, is like ordained by God in some sort of like specific narrow way.
No.
However, like, I do think that I have, as a Catholic, a natural response to authority, or I think as a Catholic, there's a certain appropriate response to authority. So,
Yeah.
what do you guys think about that?
Well, yesterday I was watching a movie about St. Augustine called Restless Heart. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
That's what our podcast is named after.
Restless, yeah, from
Go on.
St. Augustine. But anyway, it's actually a decent movie. Like, it's a
It's
Catholic
like
movie.
a cheesy Catholic movie.
Yeah, it
Part.
is a little bit. But
Okay.
I give it a B-. But it was,
that's good.
but it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't terrible, and so I kind of enjoyed it. And there was one part that actually brought tears to my eyes. Like, I was getting so choked up because there's this moment. So Augustine is like the court speaker for the emperor at the time in Milan. And Ambrose comes in, St. Ambrose, the bishop of Milan, comes in and basically like reproaches the emperor and the empress at the time for some injustice that she had done. And he was standing up for his people. And I was like, there's this deep, deep longing in my heart for an authority figure like him. There's something in my heart that's just like, I need an authority figure who's willing to fight for me on my behalf, like who's willing to stand up for the truth and speak the truth no matter what it personally costs him, because he is on my side. Like that is a yearning in every human heart, I think. And I think that yearning is good. That's from God. That's how the authority of Christ is supposed to be exercised. And like he is the one who's going to win the victory for us. The sad thing is, after original sin, we've rarely seen that. So I don't know where I was going with that, but
I don't know.
Me neither.
oh no, you're the Catholic view of an authority. Like there was a saint who said, when there was like 3 popes, and there's all kinds of messiness in the Rome. He said, I respect the seat, but not the sitter.
Sure.
And I thought that's a great line. You can respect the role of the president, respect the role of first selectman, even if the sitter is not particularly good, and you give the respect due to the role, while at the same time pushing back against things that are against God's law, or against common sense, against the common good.
Yes. So
Thank you for seconding my thought.
so
I don't know.
so I don't know, Catholic response to authority. Well, I mean, we ought to pay our taxes. I mean, basics, right? You ought to pay your taxes because
Can I argue against that?
yes.
You probably can. Let's see.
I agree. You should pay your taxes, absolutely. But does a government have a right to levy whatever taxes they wish? So,
No, and that's where it comes to the
Wow.
consent of the governed.
right.
They rule at the consent of the governed. So
I don't know.
You don't
I
know
think-
which part.
what you don't know about what? They right now, yes, the elected leaders right now can levy as much taxes as they want.
Well, I
It'll be
mean,
thrown
there's
out.
certain things that
Right.
That's not.
But do you not feel like an individual could legitimately say the common good does not need 50% of my income? I will
You could, and you'll
Particular-
likely go to jail.
possibly, but particularly because many of these projects that the government is money on either is wasteful or immoral.
Yeah.
I mean, could we not find ways perhaps to go around the tax law. And,
We do.
certainly could.
and legitimately, and not.
I mean, there are lots of tax attorneys that make millions of
So
dollars
it seems like what you're
finding
saying,
tax
what you're asking,
loopholes.
though, Father, is it okay for an individual person to say, it is my judgment that there's, whatever it is, I'm being asked to pay 45% of my income in taxes, and in reality, 32% is sufficient to fulfill the common good, and therefore I'm going to find a way to avoid paying the extra, whatever that is, 12%.
Yeah, or not even that. If there's another law that in our judgment, a judgment informed by our Catholic faith, if there's a draft, for example, and you can find a way, and you say, I don't agree with this war, and I don't agree to fight in it, and perhaps the conscientious objector thing is gone, and you have to find a way around it. Well,
So here's what I would say, and these are sort of separate questions. Money is fungible, ultimately. So you don't get to decide what your tax dollars are used for. That's not how math works. This is not like how the system could possibly work. And so I do think that you have to take it all as a critical mass. So is the government doing things that are objectively immoral? Yeah, of course. Will the government always do things objectively immoral? Probably.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think what we have to say is like, okay, what's worse? The fact that the government funds things that are truly immoral, or the alternative, which is not having government, right? So ultimately, like, this is one observation that Hobbes sort of does get a little bit right, which is like chaos and anarchy are very, 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 very bad. And so it's good. We actually do need a civil order. This is real though. So like,
Yeah.
So, okay. So, do I like that the government, I'm sure is in some way or another funding abortions or whatever? Of course not. But the evil that would come from if we all stop paying the government money would far outweigh, because far more people would die. Right. So I think that's how you have to look at this. Now, that doesn't mean that there is, there might be a critical mass of bad things where you say, what, I'm not enough. I can't pay into this because so much more evil is coming out of it than good. So I think that's the actual calculus, though. It can't be, you can't cherry pick one issue. That's the one thing. On the draft question, I think that's more of an acute thing. I think we have an obligation to not fight and kill other people in service of an unjust cause.
Yeah, I've a slight nuance I would put on the draft type of thing, is that if you're drafted, regardless of the conflict, and you actually do go in, there is something to be said about that you could be a force for good in a very small way, maybe, for that. Or you could, but the other one is like the Zimbardo study, where it's like, or you could become the problem.
But let me go back to what you said about the tax thing, right? So at what point can you rebel? Because our entire nation is based on a rebellion, right? We were taxed what we considered too much from England. So we threw some tea overboard, had a few shots at Lexington.
But we didn't have seats in Parliament. That was
right.
the real
It was
issue, yeah.
representation.
Right.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, okay? I'm in Connecticut. Connecticut is a blue state and will forever be a blue state. So as much as I may
Turn CT red, baby.
vote my brains out, it's
Which a lot of people in Connecticut do. That works out well.
right. So as much as I may vote, my voice is that was good. That was good. My voice is never going to be heard in
but
Congress,
so like
right?
in the last several years, Connecticut did defeat a tax that was trying to be imposed, right? If you remember, there was a big fight over tolls, which are a tax,
True.
and it was defeated.
Yeah,
So
instead they put in they put in another 0.5% tax on my paycheck.
I think that
Right.
it's just that you pay that though, Paul. Someone with no income, I think it's fine that you pay as much as whatever.
But no. So the question is when
welcome.
when can you rebel? Because our
Yes, thank you.
entire nation is based on rebellion. And I wrote a paper in high school arguing that the Revolutionary War was an unjust war.
Why?
Because I believe it doesn't fit any of Aquinas's five just work
Yeah, I
rights.
think that's an
six
interesting
just
conversation
work
that I just not
criteria.
equipped right now the
fair.
question of whether the
That's fair.
American Revolution was just. I'm not really equipped to get engaged in right now.
But at what point does an authority overstep its bounds where you can say, I am not going to
Yeah, I
follow
think
this
you can
authority?
do that. You're going to face consequences.
Yeah, and nobody. By the way,
I mean, and there might be a martyrdom in that,
yeah,
True.
right? I mean, so then that's what you do.
He's dead now. So got
Aquinas, yes.
Yeah, but well, no, he's actually alive with Christ. But and so hopefully he's my friend who passed away a couple years ago. He was a Marist brother, and he was telling me, we were talking about something very similar this one time. He was like, Joe, I was involved in some of the sit-ins during the '60s, and they called the cops, went to jail, and they should have, and we should have, because we were breaking the law. It's like nobody. I was never under the illusion that what I was doing was legally justified. It's like I was breaking the law to prove a point. I was happy to go to jail for it. You can't So his point was like, resist,
but just recognize-
don't pretend that you don't suffer the consequences.
Oh, no, absolutely.
If you don't, then the whole thing is meaningless.
Right. And I guess the way I look at it is like, okay, you ought to pay your taxes because, okay, let's look at the logical consequence here. So like, yeah, I mean, if I don't pay my taxes, then I'm at some point, it'll probably take like 5 or 6 years for them to figure it out, to be honest. But like, it would be some time, and then I would probably get convicted of tax evasion, and I would go to jail.
Right.
And
But is that why it's wrong?
So like,
the year
and it
before
could
you
be
do that,
because I
live
did
in
it on a
Canada.
principled on a principled stance that I don't like this aspect of government, kind of what you were discussing, but let's actually go through what logically happens there. And so it's like, okay, so what's the benefit? So then I go to jail. It's like, well, actually, I guess what I'm saying is, and maybe this is wrong, but I'm saying I value my freedom and not being in jail more than the dollars and more than whatever incremental effect I might have on this thing that probably won't be effective.
Well, that's true. We have to discern whether taking a stand against an authority is worthwhile.
Yeah, but there are hills you would die on. Look, if the government were to say tomorrow, we're going to start this new program, it's to take up a third of the federal government, and it's going to be used to shut down the Catholic Church entirely, you'd probably stop paying your taxes to that, right? Among other things, right? Among like armed struggle.
Or like if I can stir a pot that's going to be super controversial
Here we
and
go.
super local. But there was a local bishop, not ours, thanks be to God, but a local bishop who forced all of his priests to get the COVID vaccine.
I know
Now,
which bishop you're referring
I don't
to.
have
I wanna
I
find
don't
out
have a
afterwards.
I don't have a moral objection to that,
Curious.
except for the fact that I don't think that there should be any forcing. But I mean, I have a health objection to that because there could be some serious side effects that I don't really want to face, and I'd rather face COVID than the side
Yeah.
effects.
Well, you're not stirring the pot yet. Keep going.
No, but my question is, I mean, there were a couple of priests in his diocese who refused to do that, and they got removed from ministry and everything. That was the hill they chose to die
They
on.
get laicized.
I don't know what happened to them, to be honest.
Probably find another
they kind of
diocese.
stopped. Yeah, they found another diocese, another ministry or something. I don't know, but
Well, maybe that's a good thing.
I asked myself that question. I mean, thanks be to God, we have a wonderful bishop who would not require something, so difficult or so challenging. But is in the vow of obedience I've taken, is that overstepping the vow of obedience?
Did you take a vow? You took a promise of obedience.
I promise.
Differently.
Okay, technically a promise. Yeah, but
Well, I mean,
played out in
your
the same way,
bishop
more or
doesn't
less.
have like complete authority over you in every single matter. Like your bishop cannot order you to go commit a sin.
Well, that's different.
Right,
That-
but on
Right,
something,
right.
but on something that's not sinful.
Right.
Yeah.
But could be harmful to my health, or something that's just absurd. Like if the bishop says, "I need you to plant cabbages."
Yeah.
upside
So then
down.
you have
Well,
you have to kind of value. You have to put a value on what's the greater sin.
Yeah.
Right, like because you don't like it is a sin to some extent to like self harm, right? Like there is something to
Yes,
that,
but the COVID
right?
vaccine is not self-harm, obviously.
It's an extreme,
Yeah.
but to use the health example, and so then you have to kind of value like, okay, well, it's also a sin to like disobey my bishop or whatever. We're using bishop, but like it can be any authority.
Well, but I think,
right?
this
But
actually,
you have to.
this matters
There's
here, yeah.
there's a value there of like, okay, then what's the worse evil? Mm-hmm. And obviously, there sounds like there was a couple of priests who said the worst evil was putting this thing in my body, and they said sayonara.
Yeah. I mean, do you think they had that a bishop has, or anybody,
I don't know.
When we had those mask mandates, does a governor have the right to tell you where you can travel and who you can spend time?
I chose not to wear my mask a lot of the time, and just to see what kind of just as like a social experiment to see what happened, and nothing happened most of the time.
And-
There was an occasional time when like some store clerk would tell me to put it on, and I would always comply,
Yeah.
always, because I'm not like I don't want like it's not worth my time to like put up a fuss. But like planes, they would throw you off an airplane
Yeah. Well,
because
not while it's in
they
the
have
air, I
authority
hope.
to do that.
Not
And
while
they-
it's in the air.
And they have authority to do that. No, but if
They do
you
have the authority,
disobeyed in the air, they would arrest you on off. Because FAA regulations, if you disobey a flight attendant, that's a federal offense,
Yeah. No, that's fair.
which is crazy. So like flight attendants have more authority than the bishop. No, I'm like in a real and actual way.
Civilly, so
Civilly.
do
You
cops,
do,
though.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's civilly,
disobeying the bishop, I think, is a sin, and
Right,
disobeying
yeah.
your
Yeah.
flight attendant may not be a sin.
Right.
But that is kind of a gray area. Is it a sin to disobey something that's not morally wrong, but something that perhaps is logically or goes against common sense, like a mask mandate?
Well, that's like Henry David Thoreau, like civil disobedience, which had its own issues, but
So is it a sin or not? From a moral perspective, Catholic moral perspective.
I think it completely depends on what it is. Completely depends.
I have no idea.
Like, okay, so you could go back to taxes. Like,
you've
let's
listened to Restless and come up with
let's
no
say that there are. I mean, this isn't. Joe's going to yell at me because this is not actually practical or possible. But let's say the government isn't doing anything sinful with your tax money. One could argue that not paying your taxes then is actually stealing, because you're receiving.
I would argue that, yeah.
You would receive common goods and not pay for them. It's
Yeah.
a form of stealing, right? And that's essentially what tax evasion is. You're essentially getting put in jail for theft. Right, and at the heart of it, and so like that would be a sin. So the sin would actually be not to pay the taxes, even if you objected to what the government was doing.
And this is, I think, just like something as stupid as turnstile jumping is an act of disobedience and is also theft.
It's theft. Yeah, it's absolutely theft.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I would agree.
And a lot of people,
I would
I've had
agree
arguments with
that's
people in
theft.
seminary who think that it's not, and they're wrong.
Oh no, I would absolutely agree that that's
Yeah.
theft, and I think that's a different situation though than when you have a mask mandate that goes against common sense and you choose not to obey
Okay,
it.
sure,
And-
but
because I would argue, and this was kind of the point of my senior thesis, that a government's authority only extends as far as the common good, and when they make a law, because Aquinas says that a law is a dictate of practical reason. So anytime that you go outside of what is common sense, like good for the community,
Yeah.
and you can see that rationally, then you have a right
Well, yeah.
to disobey it.
And you saw that like Canada's COVID policies were like absolutely absurd. And you saw the trucker convoy go to Ottawa and to all the different places at border crossings and like shut them down. They're like, no more.
Yeah.
We're not doing this anymore.
But what did Justin Trudeau do about it? He froze their assets.
He froze their bank accounts.
right. So
It was like, what?
So
I don't think
you-
Justin Trudeau is the
Justin
should
Trudeau
be our standard
Justin
of
Trudeau
No,
is
but
what we
just-
like to
yeah.
call in very common Catholic parlance a clown.
yeah.
Okay.
dictator. Yeah.
I mean, that's
A clown with authority, which is
Clown
like
with
the
authority.
worst
But Father-
possible clown.
Even worse than Pennywise the clown from It. That's
Right.
Okay, so Father, counter to what you're saying, though, I agree that authority really only extends to the common good. However, somebody has to judge what the common good is, and I think the reality is this: if we lived in a society in which individuals if individuals got to decide whether each individual law was in accordance with the common good, and then disobey it if they thought not, that would be chaos. So I think there's an amount of buy-in we have to have, because again, a government is an important thing to have.
yeah.
So I think there's certain laws where I might say, you know what, frankly, I think this is not really, doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think it's really accomplishing anything, but it's not a grave enough evil for the whole system to break down over it.
Yeah.
Hot take, don't think that speed limits should exist on every road. Frankly, I think some highways don't need them.
I don't think the Mayor Parkway has one.
completely agree with that.
But-
other than
but-
other than the case that there are a large number of terrible drivers,
Myself being included.
and we need better driver education. Like in
Yeah,
Germany,
but you see my point though. Like
so
if
on.
you come up with laws, you're like, all right, this probably isn't really accomplishing anything, but that doesn't mean the whole system should break down. I don't think that there's 1.5 million things I could think of. Right, the government shouldn't be doing. I'm not gonna. You know what? That's it. That's in violation of the common good. And as I see
you
it,
can't fight every
and so-
battle. Yeah.
But that's my point. So I think there's a certain, again, the critical mass question to me, which is like, okay, is there a lot of nonsense in the government? Is a lot of bad and evil? Of course there is. Does that mean that I get to just ignore things? Should I rebel over? I think there has to be a real critical mass of this is intolerable, right? Again, there is a sense in which
and that
war
could
is
be-
bad,
and that could be-
revolution is bad.
But that could be different for every person, what they think is intolerable, right? Because I know some people that thought the mask mandate was so intolerable they would never wear it.
Yeah, but that's just ridiculous. I'm sorry, that's just ridiculous. I don't like the masks either, but it's
Well,
not.
that's
It's,
why,
it's,
that
was the hill they wanted to
it's
die on.
just
I mean, it's like-
not the end of the world,
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's why my stance was that I'm going to not wear it as much as possible.
Sure.
But if I'm ever asked, I'll comply because.
But then but you have these seminarians and priests who are like, I want to be martyred. And it's like, well, you wear a mask to anoint somebody in a hospital? No. Okay, then you know what? Spare me the stories of your
Yeah.
martyrdom. All right, because you're such a fake. You're not. If you really die for Christ, wear a mask for him for 10 minutes. How about that?
Right,
You know
and
what I
that's
mean?
and that's fair. I
so
still
exhausting,
wear
these
masks
people.
when I go to nursing homes like that. I'll
Yeah.
wear a mask there, and that's not a.
Guess what? If you don't
big
think it
deal.
matters, who cares? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't
that's-
think
I
my
mean,
feelings
well,
matter.
there's-
there's
sacrifice.
pride.
That's
There's
the way
pride. There's
Willing to
pride in
make,
there.
it's not
There's
a-
pride in there. My discomfort in wearing a mask trumps the administration of sacraments.
And the irony
It's
is,
like, well, that's
there's
bad.
a certain kind of Catholic thinker who will say things like, America's obsession with autonomy, individual choice. It's unhealthy. We need to be more communitarian minded. Okay, here's a law for you to follow that applies to everybody. This is infringement of my rights. All right, take a seat then. You know what I mean?
I will say-
And that's the balance of all authority, right? Is that
Yeah.
we do have individual rights, and the rights are subsumed to the common good too.
Yeah, I would say that
Both and.
back to where America's place is, right? I would say that I think that America, and we saw it, you get a little bit in Canada, but probably more in America, where we really don't like people telling us what we should do or what have to do or what we ought to do.
Sure.
We really
Based on
don't
freedom.
we really don't like that. And so in Europe, it's, when they put in all the different COVID mandates in Europe, they all kind of shrug their shoulders and it's like, all right,
Yeah,
sounds
it can be a
good.
dangerous thing in America too. People's relationship with the church really is damaged in America by our understanding of authority. You'll say things like, well, why can't I don't know, why can't women be priests? And it's like, well, the church has been pretty clear that's not possible. Oh, because the church says so. It's like, no, I'm not making a claim about arbitrary authority. I'm making a claim about real authority rooted in the gospel, rooted in the living God, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we Americans have no ability to grapple with that because they think any amount of authority is bad. To the point where I've literally heard Catholics say, "Yeah, no, I'm a Catholic, absolutely. Don't tell me what to believe, though."
But I'd be honest,
you know, like-
I have often had a negative view of authority, and this is why I wrote that paper in college, because so many authority figures have been bad authorities, right? And we saw that in the church, that there's a lot of bishops, and even to this day, a lot of bishops are covering up sexual abuse scandals. And the civil authorities, I grew up during the Clinton presidency when he's lying under oath, and this is the man who's supposed to be the uniter of our country.
What we do for that now?
So I think that's, if we had a leader like St. Ambrose or like Ronald Reagan or like John Paul II, then it's to be like, you know what? Even if I don't disagree with him, I trust him. And I trust he has my best interest at heart, and I trust he's going for the common good. I can't trust our president about that. I can't trust even many church leaders that they really have the common good of the people that they're serving at heart, because it's not service. And Christ says authority should be service.
Right.
Did anyone see Cabrini, the movie, yet?
I did.
No.
I thought it was excellent. Talk about authority.
I thought it was terrible.
You thought it was terrible. Why?
Yeah, because she took a vow of obedience and never followed up with it, never lived it out. She disobeyed every person. And I know everyone's like, no, she never technically disobeyed. No, she didn't. You're right. But she disobeyed in spirit every single order she was given by her authorities.
Well, you would say good came out of it, though, yeah?
Sure. So did the American Revolution. It was still an unjust war.
Allegedly.
I'm glad I live in America.
For a future episode's discussion.
Yeah, anyway. Allegedly.
Yeah.
But-
Well, you could say that. So maybe just to push back on that just slightly, is that you were talking about like unjust authority. Well, she was coming up against like unjust authority.
True.
Right. And so you would say, just like how I said, well, if the bishop goes and tells you to commit a mortal sin or any type of sin, you would say like, no.
Well, of course, but that's very different than me wanting to do something good and my pastor saying no, or my bishop saying no. And that's happened to me many times in my priesthood.
Right.
Had a passionate idea. This is what
She had
God's calling
the
me.
good thing about she had the Pope on her side. To some
She did.
extent. Yeah,
She-
and
so it's like, she's
anything that happened, she would like hand the letter over with the papal seal and be like, "Hey, sounds good."
That's true. And I think the movie, was probably, I think she was much holier, of course, than the movie portrayed. In the real.
Yeah, and I think they tried to strike a balance between. They wanted to appeal to a wide audience, and I think they largely struck that.
And
because there's a lot of like Catholics are like, there wasn't enough praying and adoration. It's like, okay, fine, but like,
praying and adoration scenes are boring.
Exactly.
Sorry,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. It's like it wouldn't appeal.
I know
Like,
she did it.
like I don't need to see like Jesus in the monstrance, like probably fake, like not real Eucharist in the monstrance,
Right. Yeah.
like on a movie.
Yeah. I mean,
Like, I don't need to
know
see
she's-
that.
Yeah, that didn't bother me. It was just more the obedience thing, because.
Yeah.
But anyway,
But she had the Pope on her side.
she did.
Leo the 13th.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I wish I could have a moral to wrap this thing up with, but I'll be honest. I think I'm not sure where we're
It seems
going.
like
Roma
we've-
locuta est, causa finita est. That's our moral for the day. Whatever Roma
is that?
says. Roma spoken and the case is closed.
I see.
Rough translation.
I know, but I'm not sure we can still say that. But anyway.
Well,
Okay.
But anyway.
yeah, for listeners to say.
Anyway,
no.
it's a blessing. It's a blessing to be an American. Absolutely is. And for the most part, we should definitely obey.
And I think one thing that I'll end on is that we definitely we should vote. We should vote.
I would love to have an episode about why I disagree with that so strongly.
Okay. Well, Joe.
Sounds like we need to continue
And
this.
Joe's wrong.
I'm
But
anti- I mean, I'm
you
pretty
can-
anti-voting
You
at
can
this
still
point.
vote.
You
still
can if
vote.
you want.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Please vote.
future
Anyway, it's an
episode.
interesting reflection. I definitely do recommend reading the Catechism on this topic of authority. And if you know any, I don't know any good spiritual books other than Aquinas talks a great deal about that in
I think there's stuff in the
one of
aforementioned Donald
Summa.
Trump endorsed Bible. I think there's some stuff on authority there.
quite
Check out.
A little bit. Yeah.
Some
I would say
cyclical
Scott
essential-
Hahn's "It Is Right and Just" talks a lot about this.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Yeah, excellent book. Yeah.
Okay, good. So that we have at least a recommendation for our listeners that we didn't
Yeah.
just ramble for 45 minutes and get nowhere. But some interesting things
We did
to
that.
talk
But we
about.
did other things too.
Yeah, interesting things to talk about, interesting things to think about, and something that's very practical to all of our lives. So let's continue to study that issue. You can find, and hopefully it was an interesting episode. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM or 103.9 FM, and wherever you get your podcasts. So tune in next time.
Hey everybody, this is producer Matt. If you liked this week's episode of Restless and want to help the show grow, please rate us, review us, and subscribe on your preferred platform. God bless.